Welcome to Demming Chronicles Season 2. We chat with persons whose ideas may not be mainstream, but those ideas make a difference to our country. Those are the ideas that we hope will change behavior. We are committed to changing conversations in order to change behavior. On this week's program, we have Marla Dukharan.
Hi, Denise. Thank you so much for having me.
Welcome, Marla. And we also have Rubadiri Victor.
Hi, guys. Hi, Caribbean.
Thank you very much, Marla and Rubadiri. Demming Chronicles. We'll be back with you shortly. Welcome back to Demming Chronicles. And on today's program, Marla Dukharan. Marla speaks to sustainability and fiscal rules. Welcome, Marla. And I want to begin with a question about a view that was recently expressed in Trinidad and Tobago, that our foreign exchange shortage is really a reflection of our lifestyle. What is your take on that comment?
Yeah, that's a good question, Denise. And it's not the first time we've heard that we import too many strawberries and Johnny Walker Black, right? And that's the real problem we have. Not the FX problem, and that's the cause. And that's actually one of the most absurd things I've ever heard coming out of our policymakers' mouths. The first thing to note is that what really drives the net outflow of foreign exchange from any country in the Caribbean, which is really the deficit on the balance of payments, what really drives that is fiscal spending. Because the government, if you think about it, government is the largest consumer, the largest economic actor, the largest employer. And so the more government spends, and beyond that, the more the government spends beyond what they earn, the more they drive the import bill higher. Because remember, roughly 80% of what we consume is imported. So the more the government consumes and spends, the more we import. So that's the first thing we have to remember, that it really boils down to the fiscal deficit, which is why we call it a twin deficit. The fiscal deficit is what drives the deficit on the balance of payments, which is just a fancy term for the net outflow of foreign exchange from our country. That's in essence what is driving this, not the level of imports in terms of non-essential items like alcohol and whatever that they would like to attribute to lifestyle.
What action would you suggest would be necessary to solve this Forex problem?
Well, as I had outlined in a recent article, I mean, it would have probably been last year, where I addressed why is it so hard to get US dollars in Trinidad and Tobago. What you really need to do is address the fiscal deficit. As I just outlined, the fiscal deficit is what is the largest driver of the balance of payments deficit, which is the net outflow of foreign currency. So we need to address the fiscal deficit. We've not had a balanced budget since 2009, when the late Patrick Manning was our Prime Minister and our Minister of Finance. And we even had a deficit in around the 2012-2013 period, when we saw the highest level of fiscal revenue our country ever saw, just about 61 billion TT dollars. And it probably will be the highest we will see for a long time. And we still weren't able to balance our budget then. And so that speaks to a structural problem that we have of overspending on the fiscal side. And that is the first thing we need to fix. The second thing we need to fix is the fact that the TT dollar is the single most overvalued currency in the entire Caribbean and Latin America. It's estimated to be about 40% overvalued. And if you look at the black market rate, you would realize that that's not such a far-fetched number, because we hear of US dollars trading in the black market for anywhere between $7.50, I've heard even up to $10. So those two factors, the fact that the government overspends and the fact that the US dollar is actually subsidized in Trinidad and Tobago by the government. The central bank could otherwise be selling TT dollars for $8, $9, I don't know. But the fact is it's being subsidized by the government. And insofar as you subsidize something, then there will be overconsumption. Furthermore, if you can buy TT dollars at $6.80, let's just say, and you can sell it for $7.50, $8, $9. Why would you not? That's a business model. So that also needs to be corrected. in terms of enforcement of the black market rules that we have and trading of US dollars via unofficial channels. And those are the things that I would fix if I could to address this problem.
The man in the street looking at this program who has no interest in economics, has no background in the way that you have, why should that person care about this foreign exchange shortage?
Because at some point, when we run out of US dollars, that is actually called a balance of payments crisis, which Barbados ran into in 2018, middle of 2018, which Suriname ran into last year and a few years prior. What happens when you don't have enough foreign exchange is, first of all, you default on your foreign currency denominated debt. And then you run out of foreign exchange to buy the things you really need. Forget strawberries and Johnny Walker Black. I mean, medication, essential food items, all of these things become at risk because you don't have enough foreign currency. And then what you have to do is you have to go to the IMF and you have to ask them for assistance. And the IMF comes in and then starts to try to put your socioeconomic policy in order to avoid the situation continuing. And so the reason the man on the street, so to speak, should pay attention to this is because this problem speaks to an unsustainable situation that one day will crash. And the same man on the street that the policymakers say, well, we cannot devalue the dollar because the man on the street will suffer. Well, the same man on the street is the one who will suffer when eventually we default and the IMF will come in, or because we don't have enough fiscal revenue, you have to cut public sector wages, you have to cut wages and salaries, you have to cut subsidies, you have to cut, everything has to cut. And that's when things hit rock bottom. And if we could avoid getting there, we would all be better off, not just the man on the street, right? But that seems to be not where the heads of the policymakers are. It seems like they want to continue along this path of unsustainable and, in my view, harmful fiscal and foreign exchange policy, which means we will hit a wall. And I am predicting that by about the end of next year, we will run into a balance of payments crisis and we will run out of foreign exchange.
That is not very comforting, Marla, that by the end of 2022, at the outset, in the kind of long view, that we will hit this balance of payments crisis. If you could do something right now, what could, for instance, what could the citizen do in order to try to help?
Well, to be honest with you, it's not really in the hands of the citizens. As I said, the government has to address the fiscal deficit. But the other thing is that the currency is so overvalued. Do you know that we had something called an auction mechanism, which governed the way that the central bank conducted its injections of foreign currency into the market? And so that the banks were able to look at their book in terms of the demand and the supply for foreign currency, and they can bid on how much they wanted to pay based on how much demand there was for foreign currency. And that allowed, I don't know if you remember, Denise, before 2012, that auction mechanism was abandoned by the prior governor of the central bank in about April of 2012, if memory serves me correct. But before that, I don't know if you remember that we had this very slow, steady depreciation of the TT dollar that nobody even noticed and nobody cared. But what it was a very important mechanism that helped to, it was like a release valve on a pressure cooker, if you will, that allowed some of the steam to be released, and so that the currency did not become heavily overvalued. And then for some unknown reason, the last governor just dismantled that mechanism in 2012. That worked very well for a long time. I think Governor Ewart Williams was the one who implemented it. And so that is what has led to this overvaluation. If I could have done something, I mean, the people really, what they can do is lobby the policymakers, but the policymakers have to be the ones to do these, to implement these policy measures. And I think that is one, and as a matter of fact, Minister Imbert in his maiden budget speech in 2015 said, and in 2016 said, that he will reintroduce the auction mechanism to the FX injections, and he never did. And the thing is, I think if it's one thing we should do immediately, and we could do it overnight, and the central bank knows how it works, and all the banks know how it works, and it can be done easily, like a switch, that's one thing I would do, but I'm not sure why it's not being done.
From what I understand you to be saying is that that auction mechanism it resulted in a slower kind of depreciation. So that
manageable depreciation.
And we didn't even feel it. But
No.
what you seem to be predicting is that in the absence of that, there will be a real halt and a real kind of crash.
Yeah, I think so.
That is not a very, very optimistic view.
And it's so avoidable. That's the thing about all of these, how should I say, these, pessimistic, if you will, predictions that I'm making as to what will happen. It is so painfully and easily avoidable. It's almost as though these policymakers are determined to crash and burn because it's so easy to avoid it. It makes you wonder.
But crash and burn is not an optimistic view. It's not even a view I want to entertain.
No.
But it seems as if that is something that we will reach to, crash and burn. And it seems as if we're just heading for IMF intervention. Is that how you see it?
Indeed, definitely. Now, IMF intervention, first of all, the IMF doesn't swoop down and ask and impose anything on any country. The policymakers reach out and they ask for help, and they ask for a fund-supported program, and this is what happens. And then the IMF will come and lend you money, but also give you policy advice as to what you need to do to remedy the situation. You could also go the route of Venezuela, and you have a balance of payment crisis, but you refuse to go to the international agencies like the IMF for help, and all you do is you print money to pay wages and print, and then your money means nothing and is worth nothing, and nobody wants to hold it, nobody wants to use it, and your economy collapses, and people, there is an exodus. There is an alternative, but I would think that we would end up at the IMF.
Marla, you've raised the issue of just being able to print money, which I did not contemplate as an option, because I thought printing money had a relationship with your reserves.
Well, no, that's when you have when you have a currency board arrangement, which is what the Eastern Caribbean has, and which is what the Cayman Islands, and I think Bermuda as well has, where you can only print local currency as much as you have US dollars to back it. We do not have a currency board arrangement in Trinidad and Tobago. So our government can print pretty much any amount of foreign currency that they want. Local currency that they want to. So that is an option that some countries have exercised when they run into a problem. The other thing that can be done and has been done in other countries is they can confiscate your foreign currency deposits. So in addition to drawing down on reserves, drawing down on the HSF, they can look at the deposit base and say, oh, we have 3.4 billion US dollars supposedly on deposit in the banking system. And we can tell you, Denise, for your 2,000 US dollars you have in your account, let's give you TT dollars and we take your US dollars. And that gives the policymakers more runway in terms of having foreign currency and delaying the balance of payments crisis that I mentioned. So there are other things that can be done. It's just that they're rather extreme measures. And so I kind of don't think of those as baseline predictions and options, if you will. But there are all kinds of creative things that countries can do and have done in the past.
Every creative strategy you suggested sounds like a pain for the citizen.
Of course. It's the very citizen that they claim that they're trying to insulate and protect when they say we can't devalue the currency because then the price of the imports will go up and then people can't afford to eat. It's those same people who suffer when we crash and burn, basically.
Yeah. Marla, if we could just take a kind of helicopter view of this situation. And if you could come up, I know it's an unfair question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. If you could come up with maybe three strategies that could be employed, what would you suggest?
Well, I mean, the first thing is I would, in short order, re-implement the auction mechanism so that you allow for some slow and steady manageable depreciation of the TT dollar relative to the US dollar so that demand more realistically matches supply. The second thing is the government needs to find a way to reduce its fiscal deficit. Now, the government needs a debt restructure because we already have a primary fiscal deficit, which means that we are borrowing to pay interest on our existing debt, okay? Even though the government would tell you, oh, but our debt is sustainable and it's low, and it's not. It is not. It is, we've had a primary fiscal deficit for, I think, about 6 years. And borrowing to pay interest on existing debt tells you that the level of debt already is unsustainable. So the second thing I would do is I would do a debt restructure, or a liability management exercise, as it's sometimes called. And that will help to reduce the fiscal deficit and the amount that the government has to spend, because a lot of their spending goes into interest. But I also will reduce things like transfers and subsidies, and the wage bill will have to also be addressed. And the third thing I would do is I would address the extent to which the ease of doing business basically is a constraint to us earning more foreign currency. If you look at the statistics for our non-energy exports, for several years there's been a steady decline. And that does not augur well for the future of our foreign exchange earnings, because we know the energy sector is on secular decline, and we know that we cannot control price, and we have very little control over production and volume. So, but we can control our non-energy manufacturing sector, and we can support it. And so we need to look at ease of doing business reforms that support. We once had a very thriving manufacturing sector, which was the envy of the entire Caribbean. And we can do it again, but we need to have ease of doing business, which we don't have. So those would be the three main things that I would do.
And on that note, thank you very much, Marla Dukharan. And it seems that the only optimism you have given us is ease of doing business, fix that, and we are likely to be able to revitalize our manufacturing sector. Any parting comments?
I think it's a great program that needs to be able to talk about these and ventilate these issues that are not, I suppose, the usual conversation you hear, and to probably address and debunk some of the foolishness you hear, like, our lifestyle and the way and the things we like to consume is what's causing the problems. The policymakers need to take responsibility for what they're doing in terms of the harmful policies. And so I congratulate you for having these types of conversations and raising these issues.
Demming Chronicles Season 2. Thank you very much, and we'll be back with you shortly. Welcome back, Demming Chronicles Season 2. And joining us on this segment of the program, Rubadiri Victor. Welcome, Rubadiri.
Hi Denise. Hi Paul. Hi Caribbean people, planet Earth.
Rubadiri, I know you as a cultural advocate, someone who really advocates for the cultural sector, and you have an intergenerational focus. You often comment on the arts. What changes would you like to see in the arts?
Deep sigh. Okay. All right. Well, just to give like a context for some of the things. The creative industries on planet Earth right now earn about 2.2 trillion. This is pre-COVID kind of figures, but $2.2 trillion annually. This is 2016 UNESCO figures. It's the second largest industry on planet Earth. It's something that's outstripping manufacturing, the extractive industries, all the things that we hold there as the premier industries locally and stuff. For the last 20 years, that has not been so. Creative industries have been the gate openers to the service industries of planet Earth. It has what has enforced the second wave of the telecom revolution and the digital virtual revolution on planet Earth have been predicated on the work of the creative industries. So that's to set it up in terms of how that works. Trinidad and Tobago's comparative advantage as a country and as a people is its creativity and its innovation and its creative population. We have one of the most creative populations that I know historically, just in terms of the amount of folk byways and the amount of creative product per capita, per population base, and that kind of stuff. So that's to set up the thing. that wealth in the creative industry globally has been predicated upon 4 waves of setting up of ecosystems, enabling environments, policy, legislation, institutional, fiscal enablers in the countries that have been able to profit from these things. And this has been set up since the 1920s, right? These are basic ground zero things that you have to do to be able to monetize your talent on the ground, your creative talent, your IP, intellectual property, your heritage IP, all those different kinds of things. If you don't have those things in place, if you don't have those institutions, legislation, pieces of policy in place, you can't monetize. We have not put those things in place, despite the fact that we have been telling government to do this for almost 3 decades. I mean, myself and the Artists Coalition of Trinidad and Tobago, and previous generations have done this. So I'll just get into some of what that
just before you get into it, Rubadiri, tell me a little bit, talk to me a little bit about the IP that you just mentioned, because the man in the street just hears IP and can't see a relationship between that and creativity. Tell me about that.
Okay, so for instance, let's just say one of the projects that I really love, there's a top folk sculpture in Trinidad and Tobago, Samuel Waldron, has, he died, he left his place in Point Fortin in next to Egypt Village. And it's entire, this house, a tapia house that he created himself. He's a carpenter and that kind of stuff. And the entire grounds of the entire space, as well as the interior, is filled with hundreds of life-size, medium-size, and miniature sculptures, right, in his style. So that there was nothing that happened on planet Earth of note, especially in the African diaspora or in the Trinidad and Tobago diaspora, that Samuel didn't sculpt something about. So everything from pan riots to Obama inauguration to Mandela to Sir Gary Sobers to Lara to the Soca Warriors, he sculpted stuff on this. Now it's an incredible space. This space, I mean, when anybody passes by the space, it's like, oh my God, you have to, you know, it stops you. You want to go inside, you want to touch, you want to be around this thing. A space like that is safely worth, I think, to Point Fortin, probably about $100 million a year. That's what that could be worth as a monetized, adaptive use heritage site. For that to happen, you know, so that's IP, that's intellectual property that a person created that is of worth, right? That is of worth, that is foreign exchange, that attracts foreign exchange, that attracts visitors, that attracts eyes, virtually and digitally, that attracts institutional investment from museums and agencies and schools and sculptors who want to come down and apprentice with the style and all those different kinds of things. But you have to create the institution around that thing now to be able to make that happen. So you have to preserve as much as the tapia house that you can. You have to create a multimedia museum around the space. You have to landscape the space that makes it an attraction with restaurant, with food from the agricultural products and the culinary genius of the community around it and that kind of stuff. You have to create with craft and all the different kinds of businesses and domestic businesses that are in this thing, and you invest it into that space. So that space becomes a hub for the culinary stuff of the space, the agricultural stuff of the space, the performing arts, the tech, and the domestic business of those spaces all kind of factor into that space with a thing that is naturally has magnetic power because of its beauty and its stuff. Now, tourism, what drives tourism internationally right now is not sand, sea, and surf anymore. That's 1980s, pre-70s and that kind of stuff. It's cultural authenticity. People are going to spaces that offer them cultural, immersive, interactive kinds of things attached to architectural stuff that is designed in such a way that is accommodative and immersive, and it's best practice design and those things. So I just give that example. Trinidad has, I would like to believe, like how Antigua has 365 beaches. It sells itself as having 365 beaches. Trinidad has, I think, at least 365 heritage sites. That's how I would like to program Trinidad.
And
365.
when you talk about a heritage site, we tend to think of a heritage site as things like Whitehall, like the around the savannah. Those are the things but what are some of the heritage sites that are just not on the radar? What are some of those?
So what I have to say is that those are heritage sites, but they're what I'll call passive heritage sites. So they have an investment into the aesthetics and the history and that kind of stuff. So they already have a magnetic quality, but we have not created anything from that. So Whitehall by itself doesn't do anything for you except people pass by, well, it's spruced up now, and take pictures and whatever, that kind of stuff. That really doesn't drive monetization and those kinds of things. Now, if you had adaptive use spaces inside of it, interactive museum spaces, those kinds of things, tours with expert trained tour guides and those kinds of things, and you start to select what are the artifacts inside of here that the things that might compel people, that have story behind it. What are the things that were touched by slaves, by governors, by like heroes? What are the things inside there that have story? How do we compel the story out of artifacts and those things, and create sites within those, miniature sites and those things? So like the Magnificent Seven, if you say, well, okay, we could make Stolmeyer's Castle, and we select, let's say, the 100 finest artifacts in Trinidad and Tobago. And these could be anything, things that it might be medals won by people, it might be crown, the tiara that Penny wore, it might be a sword that was fought in a battle, or a liberated slave thing, like the bones, it might be the space that you put the bones of the Banwari man, you put it, and those things. 100 artifacts, right? So you've 100 finest artifacts, and it's inside there, and you have a guided tour. All of a sudden, and then you say, a space like that can generate 1,000 visitors a day at 6 days a week at $20 a visit. That's not counting the money that will be spent in the merchandise shop and the cafeteria and those kinds of things. So each person is worth $100. So that's $100,000 a day multiplied by 6, multiplied by 30, by 25, multiplied by 12. You understand?
I get the picture, because whenever you go abroad, that is what happens. You go into a castle and you see the bedroom that somebody slept in, you see the clothes that they wore, and so on. So what I'm hearing is
they didn't leave it like that. That had
no, they didn't. Somebody went in.
to be curated and designed and those kinds of things. Those things are created and built, and they're built like amusement parks. They're like attractions. So like, what is your main ride? What are your secondary rides? What are your tertiary rides? And how do I bring people in by zinging them with the big ride? But whilst they're there, I know they will go on the secondary ride, and then I might catch them on some of the other things. And I know by the end of this thing that they spent $250, and I can bring in 150 people per hour. But that's how you.
Rubadiri, let's look at the future, and I want to ask you, if you could influence the future, what are some things you would ensure is done in our society?
Right, as I said, is that there's no way that we can monetize things if we don't create the enabling environment of policy, legislation, and those kinds of things, right? So simple thing, like we just spoke about heritage. Heritage right now probably earns somewhere in the region of a couple $100,000 a year in terms of foreign exchange and that kind of stuff. It could easily be earning about $1 billion in foreign exchange to the country.
Did you say $1 billion or $1 million?
Billion. 1 billion TT dollars. That's a conservative.
I know you have no problems with people thinking that you're crazy, right? But to move from where we are to $1 billion is a big transition.
We just spent $1 billion on the Red House, right?
Yes.
But there's no plan in place in terms of the programming of the Red House as a heritage site. The Red House, we told them the Red House alone could be earning you about $250 million a year as a heritage site, in terms of guided tours, in terms of virtual stuff, in terms of heritage things, in terms of artifacts touring the world, in terms of all different kinds of things. But you have to program it. As a
Yes.
passive building sitting down there, it does nothing for you.
Nothing,
It's
yes.
just pretty, the White House earns billions of dollars a year as a house, through guided tours, through artifacts, through sales and merchandise, through all those kinds of things. It is a people's house that is there. And even while it is the most protected and most things stays with armies and Secret Service and all that kind of stuff, there still are museums, heritage sites inside of their guided tours with hundreds of thousands of people passing through there every single year.
So, Rubadiri, what you're saying is that the examples exist in other countries. We just need to sit and plan and implement and
Yeah,
activate.
since the 1800s, those examples existed in other countries. And since the 1920s, it has been formal state policy across the developed world.
Yeah.
So,
Rubadiri, I want to just ask you, as we bring this interview to a close, what is your advice to a young person who's passionate about the arts?
you have to know what went before, locally as well as internationally, in terms of the things that went into building the craft and industry that you're in, and then specifically in terms of your skill. You have to apprentice your line, your brain, your head, your hand to the geniuses of that craft locally, your indigenous language, your traditional language, as well as the international language of the best of the best. That's what you put into, then you continue practice. You put it in your hand, you put it in your hand, you put it in your hand. And because you live in Trinidad and Tobago, where you do not have the enablers in place, you're going to have to learn to fight, right? But that fight can't be you just, because we don't have institutional memory, so you're not going to be getting the information just off the bat about what does not exist. Although if you go on the Artist Coalition website, artists with an S, coalition.wordpress.com, on the sector document page, we have an open forum page where you can get a lot of the documents telling you what has happened, what the best practice is for different kinds of things, what are the things that are missing, what they look like, what the feasibilities are, those kinds of things. But you need to get the information so that you're more equipped to be able to battle for your voice in a space like this that is as Philistine as Trinidad and Tobago is. You need to join an organization, and you need to be able to get information, band together in groups to be able to lobby and to be able to collectively work to be able to do work. But government needs to implement the outstanding enabling environment things, the 50% local content quotas that has been on the books for the longest while. They need to invest in the national trust. They need to invest more money into the national trust. They need to invest more money into the film sector. $1 million is what they give to.
It's certainly not enough. $1 million will not get us.
That's not even a featuring budget on a small American film, but that's for the entire film industry in Trinidad and Tobago. That is madness, right?
On that note, Rubadiri, thank you very much for taking us outside to understand what the possibilities are, what the potential is, the kinds of. Demming Chronicles, our guests this week were Marla Dukharan and Rubadiri Victor. Two different kinds of conversation, one about the economy in terms of what we ought to be doing, and one about the cultural sector. Demming Chronicles, like and share, ensure that other voices hear the discussion. Demming Chronicles Season 2. Until next time, be safe.